In any version of World of Warcraft, whether you play Retail, you play Classic, you play Season of Discovery, or you're getting ready for Mr. Pandaria, everybody's different. Some people like a really challenging, engaging spec to play, others just want to roll the class that's the most overpowered, and some just want to be able to do pretty good damage or pretty good healing, tanking ability, whatever, but with minimal effort. So this video is going to be incredibly subjective because it is just my own personal experience, my own personal opinion and thoughts around what I would consider to be the 3 easiest specs to play. Now, we can't base everything on it being easy. We want it to be easy, but we also want the output that it's doing to be really strong. What you also need to realize about Mr. Pandaria is most classes have got some form of raid cooldown. So this would be something that you just can't escape on whatever class you play. If you play a warrior, you're going to be expected to use banner when it's called for. If you play a death knight, you'll probably need to anti-magic zone when it's called for. A hunter may not just be in charge of making sure that EMDs adds into a specific tank or off tank, but also making sure that he's always got the right pet for the raid composition that you're running. So there's kind of a certain amount of responsibility that you just can't get away from no matter what class you play. So we are focusing purely on if you're just stood still and doing damage to the boss, how easy is that to do? Because the less focus that you need to put on your rotation, the more focus you can put on the encounter and the mechanics that are going on. Now, before I even tell you what my top 3 are, I'm going to tell you now that there's more than just these 3 that are actually pretty easy to play. There's a few honourable mentions that we can just get out of the way straight away, because if you want to play a Warlock, Destruction Warlock is particularly easy to play. It's barely changed from Cataclysm, so if you can get to grips with the basics of it right now, you'll be fine in MoP, because again, rotationally, it's pretty much identical. With the removal of needing to stance dance or anything like that as a warrior, Arms Warrior in particular is a pretty simple spec to play as well. And while I think they're easy to play, things like a Destruction Warlock, you've still got to take into consideration that you need to know when you can stand still on a boss fight, when you can move, managing your resource properly, which would be Burning Embers, for example, as a Destruction Warlock. So even though rotationally it's quite simple, there's quite a bit of micromanaging to do. Although saying that, as a Destruction Warlock, you would have the option of running Kill Jaden's Cunning, so you can actually cast your filler while you're moving anyway, which does make it a little bit less punishing. But with the 3 easiest specs that I've chosen, I do truly believe that there is no specs easier than these to be playing in a raid. Firstly would be the Frost Mage. Now, the reason movement don't worry a Frost Mage too much is just because of the sheer amount of damage that comes from instant casts. From using your Fingers of Frost procs on Ice Lance, using Brain Freeze procs on Frostfire Bolt, and then when you're firing off your big frozen orb every 1 minute, it just feels amazing even on AoE. And you've got really powerful glyphs that enable you to do even more AoE by allowing things like Ice Lance and your Mastery to actually cleave onto an additional target. Now, the only complication really that comes from a Frost Mage would be your tier 6 talents. So this is when you're having to use either Invocation, which basically removes the cooldown of Evocation, and it just gives you a 1 minute buff when you do a full cast, but a full cast of it or a full channel of it doesn't take that long due to how the talent changes Evocate. Incanter's Ward, just for basically pure laziness and pure passive spell damage, which if you really want easy, this would be a good way to go. And then Rune of Power, which is a Frost Mage you really don't need to worry about all that often. Being able to get Ice Flows, so when you do need to move, you can actually move and cast your Frostbolt. Your pet even now being able to cast while moving if you use Glyph of Water Elemental, and it also just gives it more health, so a lot less likely to die. The Frost Mage is just insanely fun. If this was the top 3 fun specs to play video, spoiler, that's probably going to be one that comes out in a few days, the Frost Mage would be at the top of that as well, because it just feels so good seeing big numbers, being able to just instant cast so much of your toolkit, and only really needing to stand still to cast one ability, and that's Frostbolt. And the good news as well is Frost Mage absolutely pumps. In fact, if I was to guess, before we've even got accurate sims, and the beta's still obviously in its very early stages, I think Frost Mage is going to be one of, let's say, the top 3 or 4 specs. And seriously, even if you do your rotation wrong, you're barely punished for it, which is a really, really big deal. As long as you're keeping up your bombs, so either Living Bomb, Frost Bomb, or Never Tempest, casting Frozen Orb on cooldown, consuming your Ice Lance and Frostfire Bolt procs, and then just pressing Frostbolt when you've got nothing else to do, it's really that simple. So I think if you want an easy caster to play, Frost Mage is the way to go. However, if you'd prefer to be up close and personal, then the Assassination Rogue is as simple in Mist of Pandaria as it is right now in Cataclysm. All 3 rogue specs are viable, so if you do want to venture outside of Assassination and want a little bit more of a challenge by playing something like Subtlety, you absolutely can. But with the addition of a 3-minute cooldown being Shadow Blades, which all spec of rogues get, which basically just turns your auto attacks from doing physical damage into shadow damage, an extremely simple rotation where you've got one builder that you use above 35% and one builder that you use below 35%, and then really you've only got one thing that you need to manage, and that's Rupture. Now you want to keep Rupture up with 5 combo points preferably, but it just being on the target is good enough. You'll only need to slice and dice once in the fight, because every time you use your other finisher, which is Envenom, it's still going to be refreshing slice and dice to full duration, and honestly, that's it. You're literally pressing Mutilate above 35% or Dispatch under 35%, putting Slice and Dice up once, keeping Rupture on the target, and then using Envenom to both refresh Slice and Dice and give you the Envenom buff and do damage. You do have the addition of a proc just to make it slightly more interesting now, which is Blindside, which just gives your Mutilate a 30% chance to allow you to use Dispatch. Now, Dispatch replaces Sinister Strike, and this is a combo point generator which is classed as an execute ability. Kind of the way now in Cataclysm where you can use Backstab when the enemy is below 35%. Now you've just got a separate ability which replaces Sinister Strike called Dispatch. And the proc that you get has a 30% chance to let you use Dispatch irrespective of what the health of the target is. Now, I do think Assassination Rogue, like it always has, will be very steady on the amount of damage it does. It's not got insane burst potential, but executing that very easy rotation will yield really good numbers. Do I think they're going to be one of the top melee DPS? Probably not, but I still think they'll be doing really good numbers. The reason I don't think they're going to be at the top is because I do fully expect things like Arms Warriors, Subtlety Rogue, so you'd have the option of playing the top DPS spec or at least trying to get to grips with it, and probably Unholy DK are going to be doing more damage in the first phase. But Assassination Rogue is very, very easy to play, and like I say, it will still do good numbers. Do I consider it fun personally? I don't think it's as fun as a Frost Mage, but it definitely is a bit more fun. Now you've got the addition of Blindside, so you can get those Dispatch procs. And then finally, one of my favourite specs, which could seem a little bit biased, because if you watch me stream on twitch.tv/Scottejaye87 or kick.com/Scottejaye, I had to get that in, didn't I? Then you'll know that I've done all of Firelands and all of Dragon Soul as a main Elemental Shaman. Now, the Elemental Shaman already in Cataclysm is very easy, and they get some amazing quality of life changes and actually a slight nerf to the one thing that actually makes Elemental Shaman even remotely difficult to play in Cataclysm. We'll get to that in a minute. But firstly, the elemental rotation is so easy that I can raid lead without even looking at the screen most of the time, which is kind of why I play it. And the rotation feels almost identical to Cataclysm, except for you've got one more button to press now, and you've got an amazing cooldown called Ascendance. So firstly, when you use Ascendance, it makes your Lava Burst have no cooldown, and Chain Lightning becomes Lava Beam. So you're going to be firing off loads of Lava Burst during this big cooldown, doing amazing single target, and on AoE with Lava Beam it does crazy numbers. And we already know how powerful Chain Lightning is on cleave damage. Lava Beam's the same, and you've still got Chain Lightning, obviously. But the general rotation as an Elemental Shaman, as I say, is almost identical. You're keeping up Flame Shock, you're using Lava Burst on cooldown. When you've got around 7 stacks of your Lightning Shield, you're going to Earth Shock, and then all you're pressing is Lightning Bolt. And the great thing is, Lightning Bolt can still be cast while moving, and you don't even need a glyph for it. Baseline for Shaman now, Lightning Bolt can be cast while moving. So it doesn't matter if you're Resto, Ellie, Enhancement, every Shaman from level 1, I've done that, like it was 11, it's not, it's 1, can cast Lightning Bolt on the move. So movement on fights just doesn't matter because, okay, you might delay a Lava Burst, but you're still doing amazing damage with Lightning Bolt, and your instant cast when you're using Earth Shock. And on AoE and Cleave, you're going to be doing exactly the same thing as you are now, just more or less spamming Chain Lightning. In Phase 1, is Elemental Shaman going to be one of the biggest pumpers in the world? No, probably not. But I do think the fact of how simple the rotation is and how movement heavy some of these fights are in Mr. Pandaria, you can't go wrong with an early Shaman. Like I said at the start, every class gets some form of raid cooldown or raid buff or something like that, and I don't want to fixate on that too much because we'll call that more advanced mechanics around each class. I want to focus purely on how easy they are to play, and it does not get much easier than Elemental. Across the board, with many classes where there was particularly strong set bonuses through Cataclysm, some of those set bonuses have actually been baked into the spells. And one of those is for Lava Burst. So where you could use your tier 12 set, when you had a Lava Burst reset proc from Lava Surge, it made Lava Burst instant cast. Well, now when you get a Lava Surge proc, you don't need that set bonus, it's always instant cast, which again feels fantastic, especially when you're on the move. When I said about the one thing that makes it slightly complicated in Cata doesn't matter anymore in Mr. Pandaria, that's your Fire Elemental Totem. At the moment in Cataclysm, with a Fire Rally Totem, you're doing pre-pull sets and trying to get a really big snapshot, or even going back to Firelands, where it was resetting more frequently, you'd wait till all your trinkets procced, your cloak procced from tailoring, things like that, to try and snapshot a big Fire Rally. And that made a really big difference. The difference between someone snapshotting a Fire Rally correctly or not correctly really showed on details or on the logs. Well, the good news is you don't even need to worry about that anymore. You're just using Fire Rally Totem when it's ready, because it scales dynamically from your stats. So whilst, yes, you still want to be using it when you've got lots of procs up, it doesn't matter as much, because most of the time you're just going to be popping it on the pool, because that's when all of your stuff procs anyway, making the Fire Rally Totem even easier to use. Now, I did say that you get one extra button to press, and that extra button is absolutely optional, because from your tier 6 talents you get the choice between Unleash Fury, Primal Elementalist and Elemental Blast. Now, most of the time I opt for Elemental Blast. It does a lot of damage, it gives you some secondary stats, and it just feels good to use because it procs from things like Echo of Elements, which is kind of like Overload, which your Lightning Bolts and Lava Burst do at the moment, but this is completely separate, so you're also getting these. You get an Echo of Element procs and Overload procs. So Elemental Blast does benefit from this, but for me, just having an extra button feels more satisfying to use. However, if you don't want any extra buttons at all, you can use Primal Elementalist. Now, you do get extra abilities that you can channel on yourself, but most of the time it's not worth doing, because just a bonus to your elemental will actually yield more damage, especially in the early phases. So Primal Elementalist just increases the amount of damage that your elemental totems do by 80%. So you can buff your Fire Rally Totem by 80% and keep exactly the same rotation as what you've got now in Cataclysm. I mean, it don't really get much easier than that. Are you potentially going to lose some damage from not using Elemental Blast and having that extra one button to press? Very possibly, but when we get reliable sims, we'll know that for sure. Is the difference going to be so big that you're going to feel extremely punished for not using it? Honestly, probably not. So I do genuinely think that Ellie Shaman is going to be one of the easiest specs to raid on in Mr. Pandaria, along with the Assassination Rogue and the Frost Mage, which, I've got to be honest, as much as I love Elemental Shaman, I got to say Frost Mage is probably my favourite, because not only is it easy, but it is actually incredibly fun to play. Anything that's got procs where you press them and do insane amounts of damage obviously just feels great. So if you think the raids are going to be difficult in Mr. Pandaria and you're on the fence of what to play because you don't want anything too complicated, hopefully one of these three are for you, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, be sure to like, subscribe, check out the merch store, which is new Mr. Pandaria themed merch actually, which I've got to be honest with you, I think looks great. Check out the link to Rested XP in the description. Consider joining the channel as a member as well. All this stuff I plug at the end, it's really annoying, isn't it? Probably annoys you just as much as it annoys me having to say it. But anyway, I'll see you on the next one.